Hello and welcome back to KubeCon, CloudNativeCon London, where we're really wrapping up, or getting close to wrapping up, day one. It's been crazy busy today, and I think there's been a lot of insights going on, and I can't think of a better person to help us kind of unpack than Megan Reynolds, who's the principal at Vertex Ventures in the US, out of New York, but funny enough, your accent doesn't sound like that. You're almost old home week for you a little bit here. So, welcome on board, and also thanks for joining me, Paul.
Yeah, great to be here.
Great to have you on. I think we're just going to unpack and look at some of the KubeCon insights of what's going on today and what we've seen so far this week. So I know you're doing a lot of research. You have a research note that either just came out or is about to come out around things like observability and some other pieces. Why don't you kind of help us understand, because I don't think people think of venture capital and research notes coming out. So talk to that a bit.
Absolutely, I can give you the overview. And as you can probably hear, it's not a native New York accent. I am a native Londoner, so it's very nice to be home for this conference. And so I'm an investor with Vertex Ventures. We work a little differently to most venture firms, mostly in that we are software infrastructure specialists. And so the way we operate is very thesis driven. We spend a lot of time going deep on markets across software infrastructure. So KubeCon is our home. In a lot of ways, we have a lot of companies, portfolio companies represented here. And so when we do our work, we basically do a scan of a market. So for example, recently it was observability. And we're asking questions to execs at the largest observability companies. We're spending time with the customers of the large observability companies. And we're just trying to understand what's happening in the market, what's changing in the market that could create an opportunity for a new company. And then we use that to inform our investment decisions and invest in those companies very early. So that's just some context on Vertex, and context on observability. I think there's kind of three key things that are happening right now that are going to realistically upend the market of observability in the way that we've been building it so far. We have AI writing code for the first time, and so within engineering teams, you actually don't have coverage of everything that's being written. You have applications, non-deterministic applications being written into production that don't behave the same way twice, and you also have agentic workloads that are ephemeral, being spun up quickly for an agent to do a specific thing and then being spun down. And so in terms of observability and looking at systems and measuring systems, figuring out vulnerabilities, that whole landscape is about to explode. The complexity is going to be crazy.
No, about to explode. I think on the show floor, it's exploding, right? It's really happening. One of the things I noticed is obviously observability is a key part of this event today, right? It's happening. It was mentioned at the keynote. You walk the floor. There's so many different vendors out there. Yeah. I'm thinking about it from the context of when is this consolidation going to happen?
Yeah, I think one of the things that was interesting to that point, and we were talking about this last night, is the fact that Observability Day was yesterday. I went and took in some of that, and I thought it had the most sponsors of any of the sessions.
Yeah, it's a busy market.
It's a very busy market, and I think there's a lot that has to be done there. And I think there's still opportunities in that market, and we see that market. I mean, you're doing research there. What are you seeing as you walk around here, either in observability or in other areas of infrastructure? Because that's, like you said, this is your, Vertex is really focused on that infrastructure software. What are you seeing that's really piquing your interest as you went around so far this week?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, obviously observability is top of mind. I think, there will be a lot of consolidation, and I think that model is going to be very challenged, and so finding novel things there. I think, just everything around the AI developer and how the AI developer is going to be used in production. I think, we see a lot of code complete, and there's kind of small fractional pieces of the developer workflow that are being automated, are being taken up by AI, but enterprises aren't really getting the benefit from that yet. There's no kind of AI developer that's being used in production within an enterprise that's going and taking on different tasks. And so I think we're a long way from that, and so looking for companies that are making deployment easier. So for example, we have a portfolio company called Northflank that is making deployment much faster, much easier, so that you can kind of start shaping how you control an AI developer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when I talk to the CIOs, and that their number one challenge is modernization when it comes to application, right? But complexity and skill gaps are really, those are the two areas that are major challenges. Yeah. So, but what a lot of CIOs are telling me and organizations are telling me is, they're hiring generalists to do the job that specialists would have done in the past.
Wow.
Right, and they're pushing back on the vendors to actually provide ease of use solutions. Right, and easier to use solutions. So I think that's kind of a big play here as well.
100%.
Yeah, and in fact,
100%.
that's been one of the major themes on the show today and around over the last day or two. I mean, I was in not only the Observability Day, but I went over and got into the Platform Engineering Day, and the Platform Engineering Day, what was the most surprising about that? It was a lot around skills and people and how to make things easier. Yeah. And it wasn't as much tool heavy, which was sort of refreshing.
Yeah,
to put that
and we talked about this a little bit earlier today. Is the research that we're seeing is 75% of respondents to a recent study indicate they're using 6 to 15 different tools for observability.
15.
That's way complex. But think about it. I mean, if they're doing logging and metrics and ABM and NBM, you know, it's a whole slew of things. Yep. Tracing, right? It's a whole slew of things, and they're all individual solutions, right?
Yep.
And that all needs to be unified, harmonized, right, together.
100%, and I think that's where open source projects like OpenTelemetry are starting to become very popular.
Yeah.
Because you're having this standardization across telemetry data that ideally it removes your dependence on having to have 15 observability tools doing each a different function, and that data is completely siloed. And as you think about, can we get towards a point where we have autonomous systems engineering and like AI for root cause analysis, to do that across siloed systems is almost impossible. Like you can't cross-correlate that data. And so there's a lot of companies starting to build now that are leveraging OpenTelemetry to try and kind of give you insights across that telemetry stack, and that's like similar to the consolidation you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and I think even with that, what you see is that the developers are pushing back. And I think to your point about the number of stacks and where's all the data, plus, let's be honest, if you have 6 to 15 different tools, that's not cheap. No. And budgets are not getting bigger. We see that budgets are actually only growing by 3.5% this year across the world, which is, and again, regionally, it's even less here in Europe, and London and UK, whatever we want to call it. But we start to see this. Are you seeing that people are focusing on really how do you get out of the cost around that? When I was moderating a panel, it was the same type of discussion that we were having.
Totally. I mean, if you speak to these like leaders of enterprise companies, they're spending up to around like 10% of cloud spend on observability. That is a huge amount.
It's massive.
Because of like tool sprawl, data's all in different spaces, you're paying for storage, you're paying for ingestion, like the pricing model of that, and especially you've got an explosion of event data with the cloud that's happened over the last 10 to 15 years. It's 10x more events that you're processing than ever before, and so that kind of explosion in cost. I think like people moving to open standards, they're trying to take things in-house. Like I spoke to a leader who was driving observability at Palo Alto Networks. And he said that they'd just gone through an entire process of ripping out, I can't remember the observability vendor they had, but they ripped out their software and they built it all in-house, and it saved them a huge amount of millions a year in just doing that and rebuilding it from open data stack stuff.
Yeah, the OTel adoption is really taken off to your earlier point. I also think that there's these bespoke solutions that are out there. That harmonization, we found that 54% of respondents in our survey in 2025 are looking to replace all those different solutions with a more unified view. So they want to reduce complexity, they want to use open source tools like OTel to get there, and they want to have a common view, but they also want the flexibility to let freedom of choice at the developer level. So it's a...
Yeah, you don't want the lock-in, but you do want the lock-in, and they're like, do I centralize all of this on Splunk? Do I centralize this on Datadog? And they look at the costs and, their eyes are watering, so well, I can't do that, so how, you have this demand, but there's no good tooling, and so it's a space we're actively looking for new investments to make, and companies that can leverage modern data infrastructure and modern data architecture, things like Iceberg, things like OpenTelemetry, S3 for data storage, and then kind of finding new ways to create like an observability data lake to tie some of that together and make it more cohesive. So very active there.
I mean, it was interesting because I was doing the data on Kubernetes panel earlier, and we were talking, the last question I asked the panel, and we had Google, EDB, and Confluence on stage there, and they're people, and we were talking about the cost aspect of it. And this had to be the cost of AI and data for AI and doing it on Kubernetes, and what were some of the things that you could do to alleviate some of those costs, or what are some of the things that you what was really interesting was that, again, it goes back to this, and we're seeing this in some places, in particular with observability and observability data, been seeing it come back on-prem because it's cheaper to buy the drives, and then just, you can drive the cost down on that, and you can use open source on that to go and try to drive down the data storage aspect of it as well. But we're also seeing this hybrid nature where they are using the cloud for doing the AI portion of it, or things of that nature, because like you said, I think the amount, and you were saying as well, the amount of machine data that is being generated, especially with AI, has just gone off the charts. Are you seeing that, like you were talking about with that example there, was that the business leaders are looking at this and going, hey, this is just, we can't be spending this percentage of spend on observability. We need to find a way to get there, and we were having this discussion, it's the ROI of AI is part of it is, you got to, once it's up and running, it becomes part of that fabric of your digital business. How do you really understand all these people? Are you seeing that that's driving a lot of the thinking, is trying to get out in front of the AI wave a little bit with the observability? Yeah,
100%. I think that the cost concerns are already high from microservices, from cloud spend, and you can feel already from even like experiments with applications that's going to explode exponentially as soon as you're measuring kind of AI and having. And so I think like part of it is definitely cost. I think that's triggering the conversation, and it's getting a lot of like early stage companies in the door. But I also think like, the point about bringing it on-prem is also like data sovereignty, and companies actually, it's a cost thing, but also you want to control where your data is, and you want to control where you're processing that data. And so I think there's a couple of things that are driving that.
Yeah, there's definitely the repatriation piece is a real thing, and I'll put data behind it, because that's what analysts do, right?
Yeah, please.
We put data behind things.
Me.
Yes.
Right. So what we found is, in a recent study that we did, that 11% of new cloud native development was happening in the cloud, in the public cloud. And, right. And what these organizations were doing was they were moving their workloads to the public cloud. They were restructuring their infrastructure on-prem, and then we asked 2 years out, 33% of those workloads are back on-prem.
Wow.
So that's data that shows that that's what's happening, right? So it's a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, we see that it's somewhere around 45 to 55% of net new applications are being built in the cloud and are living there ongoing in some ways, and especially with things like inference, like you said, small language models moving to the edge. We were having another discussion around VLLM and all of these different pieces. It seems like, again, you're going to have a lot of these large observability vendors, and you're going to have the startups that come in. There will be consolidation, because it just has to be, but at the same time, the rate of change of the infrastructure and the pieces that need to be observed is so great. Are you seeing that when you're going around, to his point on the 5 or 6 to 15 different, they're just trying to get a handle on what everything does, because it's sometimes really hard to understand the overlap, and have you gotten the entire attack surface covered as well? Is that one of the things as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think coverage is super important, and I also think the way that a lot of the Datadog specifically did really well in this market was through PLG, was through selling to specific teams at organizations, getting them hooked in, getting them loving the workflow, and growing from there. I mean, look at Grafana as well, an open source platform. And so actually the way those companies grow very effectively is through actually creating silos and getting small teams hooked in, and then building out enterprise licenses. And so there's kind of almost been this like siloing by intention, which has created a lot of this friction, and then they grow those accounts and become more dominant over time. And so yeah, there's definitely a lot of friction there.
Okay, so final thought. What are you looking forward to the rest of this week and into the future here? What's on your radar?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I just think having conversations here, and almost every conversation you're in, you're talking about AI in some way, and I know we have been hammering on that, but it's just, no one knows. No one knows what's going to happen in 5 years. Speaking to developers, senior platform engineering leaders, like there's a kind of a fear and anxiety, but also like an unbridled kind of excitement about actually what is going to be possible for us to do, maybe much more cost effectively, maybe, the scale of applications that you can build will be much bigger. I think it's that anxiety or unknowing that is kind of creating some of this energy that we're feeling right now, is that just no one has a clear answer, and so people are kind of trying to find meaning and trying to figure out how to sell the business in this time.
Last thought from you as well.
I think that there's a lot that's happening here. I think that it's definitely an evolution. It's exciting. It definitely is not a lack of excitement to your point, Megan. But yeah, I think this is great. I'm really thrilled to be here as part of this excitement, because it's an interesting time that we're living in with AI.
Yeah, I agree. I think the AI it's changing a lot of the landscape in ways that people really didn't understand it was going to, and it's going to continue. And I think actually open source is out in front of a lot of the major vendors in a lot of these different pieces. I think the challenge, and it's loud and clear, is how to make it simple. And I think everybody wants the easy button, and they're going through and trying to evaluate what is that easy button going to be. So I think it's going to be an interesting week. I'm always looking for the easy button, and we'll see if we get there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Megan, thanks for coming on board. I really appreciate it. And thank you for watching this episode, our KubeCon Insights from day one. Looking forward to the rest of the week. Stay tuned to more KubeCon, CloudNativeCon from London on theCUBE, the leader in tech analysis and news.